So one way that you could do purchasing decisions is to maximize the value or attractiveness of the thing that you're actually buying, right? Like the I guess it would be the status appeal, which is a lot of people do that kind of stuff. But another way is to think about minimizing the faults that are going to happen, or looking at failure analysis, of looking sort of broadly of like, hey, if I purchase this thing, is it going to break? Are there going to be problems with this? What is the way that I can minimize the number of problems I'm going to experience when I have this particular good? And I think the combination of the two is quite, it's a good thing to think about. Is the underlying, is this going to cause me more hassles, more problems by having this particular thing than not, right? And really taking the time to assess how this thing actually functions. So my dad was always a person, he's passed away a long time ago, but he was always a person that was very careful with his purchases. And, the running joke was he used to go to the store and spend, um, hours looking at a toaster to see that it doesn't break down, right? And it often pays off, right? So looking at basic functionality, things that just doesn't have that don't have a lot of places where there could be a fault or a problem, really does pay off because it simplifies your life. One of the more bigger hassles that we have to deal with is getting things repaired, or fixing things when they break, because at least if at least in our family, it sits there for about 2 months, and then we finally get frustrated and decide to take this thing in and get it fixed. And that is pretty normal with, I believe that's pretty normal with most people. Maybe some people don't wait as long, but, it also is very time consuming with how often you have to go and repair something and get it fixed. And that, the combination of the two, sort of taking the the hassle of getting it fixed, and the stress that's involved, often it's not worth it, right? So thinking about, with purchase decisions, thinking through, how can this break, what is the problem that I'm going to experience with this, and looking at the ways that you can minimize all of those number of moments that it can possibly break on you. So another way that you could do purchase decisions that is kind of related to thinking about fault detection is thinking about both system integration, and as well as modularity, how they work together, how something, and it's kind of at opposite sides of the angle, right? Where you're thinking about, how can you get this thing to work together and have a series of systems that work together. But on the other side, how do you get it so that they're actually independent of each other? And the reason why I talk about this is, often we think of sort of systems that integrate together and sort of function together, but they often cause a great deal of problems when they're integrated together, and they don't really function the way that you think that they should function. And it takes a great deal of work to sort of work through all of these problems. And so this is what software developers, for example, might think about, is minimizing the number of different systems that they're integrating to sort of prevent faults from happening. The other thing is modularity, where you're thinking about how these things work independently but still work within the system. Like thinking about Legos, for example, right? Like Legos, a Lego brick is independent, but then when you put it together with other bricks, it actually works as a larger system. So I think, like, figuring out ways that you can get this modularity so that you can get a larger system that functions, um, within your purchasing decisions actually is quite useful. Um, and sort of minimizing the number of faults that you're going to have by getting this sort of system integration that happens through often through modularity, by thinking that, hey, do these things actually work together? Can we create something that is functional in of itself, um, but if one of the pieces break or one of the things break, it's not going to sort of take down the entire system. And I think about this kind of stuff all the time, right? Like, how do we make decisions in our own house that are relatively independent of each other? So, for example, um, you know, I'm a big proponent of buying something like an index fund or a mutual fund that has just been around for a long time. And the reason is that any component within that index fund, for example, which is a buying basically all the companies in the stock market, if any one of those fails, you don't really care about the independent failure or individual failure that experiences, right? So that company goes bankrupt, or it has a scandal. Um, it's really, you really don't care about it, right? And so there's some modularity that happens with that each of those little components are independent of each other. Um, and you might think about other purchasing decisions, right? So thinking about, one way is to keep maybe the same um, uh, you know, brands, for example, in your house, or repeating the same brands, sort of creating a somewhat of a system. Problem is often they don't function together, right? The individual products don't function that well together. Um, and then you have to sort of think about how can you make this independent, right? Um, so making things in your life sort of functional, um, independent of every other decision or every other component or product that you actually have in your life. If you do that, then you're minimizing often the amount of faults that you're going to experience and problems you're going to experience, which greatly simplifies and benefits your life. And so it's like thinking of the functionality, the usability of what you're actually buying, rather than the sort of status of this. And it's okay to buy status items, but thinking about the functionality that, hey, if you buy this thing, is it gonna break? Is it gonna cause more hassle? Are you ever gonna use it? And then think about, like, okay, there's got to be an alternative that exists that is more functional, that is going to be helpful when you actually purchase this thing. All right, so hopefully this helped out a little bit. All right, take care and have a wonderful day.